Okay, so our next team here is the Minnesota Timberwolves. Yet another team that had a very dramatic up and down season last year. What did the Timberwolves get up to this summer, Simon?
It wasn't as dramatic this summer as it was last offseason. Sorry to
That
disappoint.
is true. Yeah.
Um,
They did not have a dramatic off season, just
no,
a NBA season.
couple of minor signings. I mean, the biggest thing of their offseason. I'll start with the big stuff this time. But the biggest news was the Anthony Edwards 5-year rookie supermax um, coming in. So he's with the franchise long term. Let's all hope. Let's hope so. And then Nas Reed was also extended on a. Do you know his contract numbers off the top of your head? Like
Sorry, say
three.
again. Who?
Nas Reed, 3 years, 40 something million.
Yeah, he was making north of 10 million a year, and it was for
Yes.
3 years.
Yes. 3 years, 40-ish million. And then just a couple signings around the edges. Troy Brown Jr., he was okay on the Lakers, kind of like a deep rotation guy. Don't think he saw many minutes come playoff time. They signed Shake Milton from the Sixers. And they also re-signed Nickeil Alexander-Walker, which I thought was sneakily a pretty decent signing. I think it's important to keep him around. He's kind of had a career evolution. It's funny because, Austin Rivers was previously on the Timberwolves, and I feel like Nickeil Alexander-Walker is kind of undergoing the same character arc in many ways, where he was just kind of like a shoot-first gunner, and then he's kind of evolving into like this kind of decent on-ball stopper.
Yeah, I mean he was tremendous defensively for us down the stretch. And one thing I think he's got going on compared to Austin Rivers is just actually having some decent NBA size. He's the same size
Yeah.
as Josh Green. Like where Austin Rivers kind of like always looked a bit like a teenager that always looked a little bit like a coach's son. Though Austin Rivers was solid for us in terms of his role and stuff like that. And I think he managed to stick around in the NBA for reasons beyond that. But yeah, Nickeil would just shadow guys sometimes in terms of matchups and was able to guard up a position. I was actually, because I hadn't seen him consistently in a good while because he just hadn't really found a landing place in New Orleans or Utah. So when he arrived late in the season, I was just like, you got kind of big, Nickeil.
Regrets. He was with the Blazers for like a week or something, and we cut bait.
Now he hasn't really. The shot still hasn't stabilized, and so
right?
that's a big
Yeah,
thing
but we
to
could
watch
just
for this year.
The Blazers just needed a defensive perimeter guy last year so badly, and
yeah,
we had it. But
who knows? This was a recent development. You don't know what. You never know whether things would have worked out the same way. Another thing is,
he had to be involved in that Timberwolves culture. That's really that was the final missing ingredient.
But being put into a specific role as a stopper, because he wasn't no one was noticing his defense in Utah, even though earlier that he played more games in Utah than he did in Minnesota. Sometimes also it's easier to play with a big front court. When you're a point of attack defender, having a big behind you changes everything, because you can be a lot more aggressive, where when your responsibilities are sort of don't be too aggressive because you're also going to need to help in the paint because we're probably going to leak a hole somewhere. It kind of changes the whole context. A lot of really great perimeter defenders have earned their reputation while there was just a very monstrous back line. Not everyone is Alex Caruso, but he also I watched him in the Team Canada games as well. He didn't shoot the ball well there, but was again playing the same kind of on his toes defense, looked really disciplined and energetic on that end. So I'm pretty optimistic about I think he's going to, out of all the sort of guard wing kind of players in the rotation, I think he's kind of the number one off the bench for that group, whether he's the backup small forward or whether he's getting his minutes at shooting guard. I think he's ahead of Shake Milton and Troy Brown Jr.
Yes.
Assuming that Kyle Anderson is mostly playing at power forward.
Yes.
He'll play he'll play some small forward as well.
And that I'm sure is more than everyone wanted to know about the Minnesota Timberwolves' eighth man in the rotation.
Yeah, we can't. Hey, we're it's a step up from Markieff Morris, but
yes.
Yeah, anyways, getting into like I think there's a really solid rotation in place here. And I think we know where everyone's to fall. Like there's a locked in starting lineup with Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Towns, Gobert, and then Nas as a backup big who does Nas things. He, like drives really hard and can hit shots. Kyle Anderson last year, especially before the Mike Conley trade, basically was like our point guard. And then we have this, like, we'll see how the guard rotation shakes out, because it's like Shake Milton, Nikhil Alexander Walker. There's some young guys. There's Jordan McLaughlin still kicking around, but we also signed a couple of point guards for training camp, like big point guards. So that kind of tips the hat about the vision. Like where Daishan Nix is in there. Here, sorry, can we pause for a second?
Yeah.
My phone just keeps blowing up.
No worries. No worries.
I accidentally linked up an app to my PC somehow, and it was just like notification bombing me with. Anyway, sorry. Okay. Where were we?
Talking about the rotation.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I just think that there's a really solid starting lineup in place and good backups at every position, except for maybe point guard. But even there, I'm not worried, because Kyle Anderson handles the ball a lot. Anthony Edwards is definitely ready for more playmaking reps. And I think it's actually important that he has that responsibility to continue his development as a player. Everyone's so excited about Ant right now, right? Like he's one of the more hyped young guys in the NBA.
No, FIBA was huge for Ant, probably more so than anyone else on Team USA coming into this season.
And coming off the playoff series he had against Denver, where he just looked like the fully realized version of himself for 5 short games, 5 normal length games, but 5 games nonetheless. So yeah, watching him, I'm still really like, when you're a fan of a player, so you're rooting for their success and hoping that they achieve the best version of themselves, but you're also the most terrified and the most well-informed about how it could all go wrong, kind of thing. So I would like to see him get some playmaking reps and be more pressured as a decision maker. And I was listening to Chris Finch, the coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves, talking on a podcast with JJ Redick, and I feel like his comments about Anthony Edwards, he was pumping him up, obviously, but also kind of similar sentiments to me. It's just kind of like he said something like, Ant's got so much talent, maybe too much talent for where he's at right now, because as you saw on Team USA, there was just never a pull-up jumper that he would pass up, and there was never a rim run that he wouldn't go after. So the decision-making tree is still a little bit worrisome. And when he has a great game, he just looks like Michael Jordan, and people saw that in the playoffs, and they're all hyped. But when you watch him every single game, you're a little bit like, he doesn't do that every night. Like sometimes he like clanks his way to like a 4 for 22, just like pull up festival. And the one big thing that Chris Finch really wants him to have more in his game is to take more catch and shoot threes, because he's really good at them. Like he's actually been consistently good at them since he's come into the NBA, but he kind of likes to make things a little bit harder on himself.
He really loves those dribble pull-ups.
Yes, he does.
Kind of, it's I feel like his game on the perimeter is a little bit Tatum-esque.
Yeah, I can see that. There's a lot. I feel there's this. I don't want to get like anti-American here at all, but I feel like there's this like skill set that's coming out of like the American high school system.
There we go.
Like they all, like everyone has this, like they put so much emphasis on here's my dribble package and here's my like pull-up counters.
Yeah.
And they all have the same moves.
Yeah.
Like they all have different bodies and different movement patterns, but like at a certain point, like a lot of these players are kind of like funneling themselves into this idea of a role. And it's totally like, based on Kobe, and they want to have both the incredible dribbling package of like a Kyrie Irving and the pull-up counter ability of Kobe. I mean, that sounds awesome, right? But sometimes it steers them away from like remember that like getting to the rim and getting wide open 3-pointers are really useful things for an offense, as well as creating playmaking opportunities. Because I feel the skill set does not play into passing at all. So they're practicing these counters, and I'm like, what if while you're like in your bag, someone's like open on a cut? Like, are you seeing that, or are you lost in the bag? Because I feel like a lot of like I see that happens with Tatum and that happens with Ant. Like, you're lost in the bag right now. There's other stuff going on. You don't see it because you're kind of in a one-on-one individual workout. Like, I don't think it optimizes players, and it's usually the players that break free of that in some way that like,
really become the stars.
Yeah, that's how you become like, because Tatum and Ant are both like MVP level talents.
Oh yeah,
like, you don't get that much more talented. So them figuring out ways to like get out of the mid-range bag sometimes, like have those counters for when things are tough, but finding ways for easier offense is just something I don't see with either of those players. So I think you're bang on with that comparison.
Yeah, I mean it's more just I guess the tendencies that they have on the perimeter and kind of how they're running an offense outside of a set. It looks very similar, but
totally.
But yeah, I guess I mean the looming question is, of course, how things are going to pair with Gobert and Cat and Anthony Edwards sharing the floor this season. Is it going to work defensively? Is it going to work offensively? Is it just kind of going to be, good but not great as it was for stretches of last year? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think like the fan base is really optimistic and the team's really optimistic. Everyone, if you really paid attention to the Wolves last year, and I don't blame anyone for not paying attention to the Wolves last year, but the season wasn't all bad. It was more like dramatically up and down. Some really like humiliating losses to bad teams, some really inspiring stretches of really strong defense. It was kind of like the tale of three teams. Like, we had the initial starting lineup with D'Lo, Edwards, Jaden, Townsend, Gobert.
Yep.
And then that was sort of like a disaster to start the season. Gobert was just coming off of the Eurobasket, and Cat got sick at the last second and lost like 30 pounds. And then they didn't get a training camp together, and then Cat got injured, and then we kind of moved slow-mo to the point guard. Sorry, like we put the ball in his hands.
Well, Cat missed like 2/3 of the season.
Yeah, like the Cat was gone. Like, after Cat was out, that's when they started they changed their identity and kind of figured things out. Like, they leaned more into defense. They were top 5 defense for the whole middle chunk of the season, with the slow-mo point forward thing and turning D'Lo into more of a pure scorer. And then Cat comes back, and we also traded D'Angelo Russell for Mike Conley. So like, and then there was also some like ups, and then Jaden McDaniels punches a wall, and Naz Reid gets hurt, and Slow-Mo gets injured, and yet we were still kind of fun and feisty in that playoff series. Everyone on the Timberwolves is like very excited for another chance to show that this works, but I think everyone knows that like, if they come out to another slow start, it's going to be an NBA media circus around them. Just everyone's going to be making fun of them again. And there's going to be more internal panic at that point.
I just kind of wonder if things don't work. I mean, we can be optimists and say that it will, but if things don't work, like, what's the out?
Trading Towns.
Right. But for what?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how he plays. Like,
or does it really matter? I mean, the team's already pretty good without him. So as long as you get something of value, right? You don't necessarily have to get a player of Towns' caliber in return in order to maintain competitiveness.
They'll need another guard at some point. Like, Conley's old.
We'll see if he holds up the season. I mean, he had a lot of trouble doing that his last 2 years with the Jazz, and he was rejuvenated when he was traded to the Timberwolves, and his ability to kind of grease the wheels offensively was really what their offense could use.
And he was a huge part of why Utah was so good at the beginning of the season. Like,
yeah, that's true.
People keep pretending like Utah's bringing their roster back. I'm like, they weren't good without Mike Conley. Like they went completely into tank mode after those trades. So I mean, yeah, but he's like, I always say with players that age, just like anything you get out of them is a bonus. Don't like they could fall apart tomorrow and you're not allowed to cry about it. Like, it's just the sort of reality. And they don't have another guard behind him. Like, there's point guard minutes there, but like, especially if he goes out, that's going to fundamentally change the rotation. I like, is Shake Milton going to start? Like, I have no idea, but I think it's much more important. Like, I'm not banking on Conley's health. I think the bigger questions with the Wolves are, does Towns have get back to looking like he's kind of an all NBA caliber player? And does Gobert bounce back or continue to regress? Because I think if Gobert continues to regress, that will validate all the criticism of the trade. It'll just turn it into a definitely bad trade. Where
Well,
right now,
the
most
summer
people think
was pretty rough for Gobert. He did not
yeah, he
have
would
a
look
good
yeah.
Phoebus showing.
He looks rickety. He looks
Yeah.
just like he doesn't look as strong as he used to. There's just a lot more situations where he just seems to kind of fall down and
He doesn't look
collapse.
as quick as he used to. There's a lot of guys that just kind of were beating him with speed to the basket,
Yeah,
and he was just like half a second too slow.
yeah. He's always looked like kind of awkward, but it just he looked 10% more awkward this year. And he's
Yeah.
30. He's still 31 now. And some guys do start falling apart
He
at 30.
hasn't been a
Some
big
guys
he
usually
hasn't been a big injury guy though. So like this shouldn't be a
yeah
guy who's physically falling apart at 30,
yeah.
31.
I also want to point out he did not solve Minnesota's rebounding issues. Like
No.
that was another area where he was
Yeah.
rickety. Like it was, we got killed on the boards all year with Rudy out there, and he was supposed to kind of be a catch-all solution to that, and that didn't happen. But that all being said, the team's much more built for Rudy in year 2.
Mhm.
Like it was really awkward to realize that Anthony Edwards and D'Angelo Russell did not know how to throw lob passes.
Yeah.
Towns was the only one in the starting lineup who could throw a lob pass, and he got injured. And that's why we had to put the ball in Slow-Mo's hands. But now we've got Conley and Slow-Mo and Towns all starting the season healthy.
Yeah.
So he should be able to be put in a position to thrive, because it's not like Towns gets in Gobert's way. And I really hope that Towns gets recalibrated as more of a driver and shooter this year, and they ditch the post ups unless he's going to put on a bunch of weight again, because he's gotten so skinny. He couldn't post up anyone. He was not even post. He looked awesome in FIBA though. By the way, he was really dominating with threes and drives. So I want him to be a threes and drives kind of guy. That's my threes, drives, movement shooter.
Although I will say, I mean, he had a pretty significant size and speed advantage in FIBA, which he's not always going to have on the NBA. I guess, well, depending on who's defending him, right?
Well, he should be able to put himself in a situation where he always has one of those advantages against any matchup.
Yeah, that's true.
But he hasn't been doing that. If he doesn't have the strength matchup anymore, he was so strong when he came into the NBA. He was just beasting from day one, and he looked so athletic and powerful at Kentucky. And then he's kind of just, he got a lot of injuries, and he had some personal tragedies, and he's had these badly timed illnesses. But I'm like, can you get back to being someone that people just can't handle? Because right now he's kind of doing it all with skill, and the physical part of his game is kind of waned considerably.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I know you're looking forward to the Timberwolves season. I mean, both of us are not as high as this year as we were last year, considering they're kind of in the middle of our preview. We have them roughly in the middle of the league here, maybe a lower seed or in the play-in. But
yeah, I just hope, I think they'll be a little bit more consistent than they were last year, health permitting. So I think they finished last year with they were around 42 and 40.
Yeah,
and I feel like this year
7th in the West.
Yeah, so I feel like this year the goal is to just try to be a 50-win team.
Yeah,
and if you fall a little bit short of that, okay, it is a very parity sort of place, but also just stop losing to garbage teams. That'd be cool. Yeah. But this is also a team that could completely fall apart, and I'm ready for that. One other quick note, because we didn't really mention him much, is that Jaden McDaniels looks very ready to break out on offense. He really flashed some advanced ball handling skills last year, and in my opinion, he's already a top 2 wing defender in the NBA.
Oh,
but
yeah, definitely.
If I just don't know if there's room for him to break out on this team. I feel like he's going to end up stuck, with the catch and shoot looks and not being allowed to handle the ball. So I kind of hope that he can be integrated into the offense better, because he looks hungry for it. He looks like he really wants to drive an attack, and he looks like he has the ability to do that a bit. So I'd love to see some Jaden emphasis in the offense.
Well, that might pair nicely with Conley and with Slow-Mo. You have a couple of playmakers who are kind of more set-up guys and more aware of a guy who is able to get himself open off ball like that.
Yeah, I always say we have a bunch of smart passers around our 3 dummy stars, like Gobert, Towns, and I just do not trust the sort of decision making ability of any of them. But I really love all those role players doing it.
Yeah.
There's also an interesting little young core here that I don't know if like we'll see if one of them can seize a rotation role this year, because they got Leonard Miller, Josh Minott, and Wendell Moore Jr. all as like guys who might get a chance to crack the rotation or might not, like, play serious minutes at all this year.
Yeah, I mean, Wendell Moore, I thought coming out of Duke, he was an older player, was really solid defensively in college, could spot up from three. I thought he was going to like carve out a little bit of a niche role immediately in the NBA. That didn't really end up happening last year, but maybe this is the season for him.
Maybe, or maybe like I don't see a clear rotation role for him off the top, but if he can play backup shooting guard, there's like that's where the minutes are. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if all these guys spent most of the season on the bench. But I also think I wouldn't be surprised. I just one or two of them could steal a rotation role from a veteran if they underperformed.
Yeah, totally. Okay, we are moving on to our next team.